I came home early that day. That never happened. My boss had some emergency, a client canceled, and just like that I had an unexpected free evening. I didn't text Madison to let her know. I figured I'd surprise her, maybe pick up dinner on the way. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Too quiet. Normally, Madison had the TV on, or music playing, or she'd be on a call with one of her friends, laughing too loudly. But not today. Today, the house felt still. I walked inside, setting my keys on the counter, and that's when I heard it. A voice, low, hushed, coming from the hallway. Madison's voice? I took a step closer. No, he doesn't know. Another voice responded, equally hushed but sharp. My stomach twisted as I recognized it. Her mother. Evelyn. That's good, Evelyn said. It's better this way. You don't need his permission. I stopped. Something about those words sent a wave of heat up my spine. What permission? What was better this way? I took another step, and the floor creaked beneath me. Instantly, the voices cut off. A pause, then quick, light footsteps, and Madison appeared around the corner. Too fast, like she'd sprinted. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she covered it with a smile. Oh, you're home early. Fake. Too fake. I didn't respond right away. My eyes flickered past her to the hallway, where I knew Evelyn was still standing, just out of sight. I could feel her presence, the way the air had shifted, heavy and charged. What's going on? I asked. Madison waved a hand. Nothing. Just, catching up with Mom. A lie. An easy, practiced lie. Evelyn finally stepped into view. Her lips pressed into that tight little smile she always wore when she was pretending to be polite. We were just talking about family matters, she said smoothly. That word, family, the way she said it, clung to me like oil, slippery and wrong. I kept my face neutral even though my pulse was hammering in my ears. Like what? Madison laughed, reaching for my arm, but I didn't let her touch me. Another flicker of something crossed her face. Annoyance? Frustration? But it was gone just as quickly. It's nothing to worry about, she said lightly. Come on, you hungry? I was about to make dinner. Deflection. Evasion. A distraction. I let it slide. For now. But something was off. I could feel it crawling under my skin, whispering in the back of my mind. And I knew deep in my gut that whatever they were talking about, it was about me. I should have pressed harder. Should have demanded answers. But that moment passed, and instead of forcing the truth out of Madison and Evelyn right then and there, I let it slip through my fingers. But I wasn't an idiot. Something was off, and I wasn't going to ignore it. That night, as Madison lay in bed beside me, scrolling through her phone with that detached, distant expression she'd had more and more often lately, I replayed the conversation in my head. You don't need his permission. What the hell did that mean? I watched her out of the corner of my eye. Her screen was dimmed, but I could still make out the soft glow against her face. She wasn't laughing at anything, wasn't reacting, just staring at whatever was on her phone. I turned on my side, pretending to shift in my sleep, and she immediately tilted the screen away from me. That was new. I wasn't the jealous type. I had never been the guy to go through my wife's phone, to check her texts, to demand to know where she was every second of the day. I thought that made me a good husband. Thought it made me respectful, trusting. Turns out it just made me easy to fool. The next day, I started paying closer attention. I watched how she acted when she thought I wasn't looking, how her phone never left her side, how she'd step away just a little too quickly when a call came through. I noticed how she'd leave the house more often now, vague about where she was going, making excuses that didn't quite add up. And then 2 days later, I finally got something solid. I had just gotten home from work when I spotted Madison in the backyard, sitting on the patio furniture, her phone pressed to her ear. She was pacing, a nervous habit I'd always found endearing until now. She hadn't heard me come in. I stood just inside, watching through the window as she rubbed her forehead and hissed into the phone. No, I can't just tell him. Are you insane? Silence. Then she let out a short, bitter laugh. Oh, right, because that would go over so well. Hey babe, guess what? Mom thinks I should have a baby with. She stopped. Her entire body tensed. A pit opened in my stomach. With who? I didn't move. Didn't even breathe. Every nerve in my body was on fire, screaming at me to push open that door and demand answers right then and there. But I didn't. Because I needed more. Because if this was what I thought it was, if this was as bad as the sickness in my gut was telling me, I wasn't about to let her lie her way out of it. So I waited. That night, I pretended everything was fine. I smiled, I ate dinner, I nodded along to whatever nonsense she rambled about. I even kissed her goodnight, feeling physically sick when she kissed me back like nothing was wrong. And then at 2 a.m. when I was sure she was asleep, I got out of bed, took her phone from the nightstand, and walked into the bathroom. I knew the passcode. Of course I did. She had never changed it. I think part of her believed she never needed to, that I would never check. She was wrong. I unlocked the phone, went straight to her messages, and there it was. A conversation with her mother. And when I opened it, my entire world tilted sideways. Evelyn, he doesn't need to know. He's too selfish to understand anyway. This is about the family, Madison. Madison, I know. But if he finds out. Evelyn, he won't. And even if he does, it's already done. He can't change it. Madison, I still don't know if this was the right choice. Evelyn, it's done. The bloodline is secure. That's all that matters. I stared at the screen, the words blurring together. The bloodline. The family. He doesn't need to know. I went to the call logs. Madison had called someone a lot in the last few weeks. One number over and over. At least 3 times a day. I copied it. And then, with my heart pounding like a war drum, I went to her photos. There were hundreds, maybe thousands, most of them normal. But I wasn't looking for normal. I was looking for proof. And I found it. A screenshot. A forwarded email. A paternity test. I clicked it open, barely able to breathe. And there it was. A name I recognized. A name that shattered every illusion I had left. My brother-in-law. The test was for him. For a child. My wife had a child with my brother-in-law. And she never told me that. I don't remember how long I stood there, staring at the screen. But it must have been a while because my legs felt like they weren't even attached to my body anymore. My hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped the phone. My breath was coming too fast. My vision tunneling in and out. I wanted to believe I was wrong. That there was some other explanation. Maybe she had helped someone else get a paternity test. Maybe this was some kind of mistake. But no. The text messages. The whispers. The way she had been acting. It was all real. My wife had a child with my brother-in-law. And I was never supposed to find out. I gripped the sink, feeling like I was going to be sick. My mind started pulling memories from the past few months. Reassembling moments I hadn't thought twice about before. Madison had been distant, sure, but I thought it was stress. Or boredom. Or maybe just a rough patch, the way every couple goes through. But now I saw everything for what it really was. The late-night phone calls. The random outings. The way Evelyn had been visiting more often. The whisper I had walked in on. You don't need his permission. Because the decision had already been made. Behind my back. In secret. They did this. They planned this. And they were never going to tell me. A fresh wave of rage crashed into me. My own wife. My own family. And for what? I scrolled up through the texts. My pulse hammering. Evelyn. The family name needs to stay strong. You did the right thing. Madison. I just don't want him to find out. Ever. Evelyn, he won't. And even if he does, what can he do about it? That was it. That was all I needed. I had thought about confronting her right then and there. Waking her up. Shoving the phone in her face. Demanding to know why. But I didn't. Because that would have given her a way out. I needed more. So I put her phone back exactly where it was. I walked out of the bathroom. I got back into bed beside her, my body ice cold. And for the rest of the night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, Madison acted like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek, told me she was heading out for the day, and left. I barely heard her. Because I had one goal. Find my brother-in-law. I knew where he worked. It wasn't far. I got in my car and drove, white-knuckling the steering wheel the whole way. My thoughts were a storm, crashing into each other so violently that I couldn't settle on just one emotion. Was I furious? Devastated? Sick to my stomach? It didn't matter. Because the second I saw him walking out of his office building, looking at his phone like he didn't have a care in the world, it all snapped. I pulled up beside him and rolled the window down. Get in. He looked up, confused at first. Then something crossed his face, something almost guilty. He hesitated. I clenched my jaw. I said, get in the car. He did. We sat in silence for a few seconds, just the sound of my heartbeat slamming against my ribs. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What's going on? I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshot, and shoved it in his face. I will never forget the way his entire body locked up. His throat bobbed. His face drained of color. He didn't even try to deny it. That was all I needed. You're going to tell me exactly how this happened, I said, my voice shaking. Right now. He swallowed, staring at the phone like it was a bomb about to go off. Then he exhaled, rubbing his hands over his face. And finally, he told me everything. He sat there, rubbing his face like that was going to make this any easier for him. Like I was the problem here. Like I was the one who had put him in an impossible position. I wasn't going to ask twice. You're going to tell me everything? I said, my voice eerily calm. Now. He let out a slow breath and looked at me, and that's when I saw it. Shame. Good. Because he deserved to feel every ounce of it. It wasn't my idea, he said finally. I almost laughed at the audacity. Oh, so my wife just tripped and fell onto you? That's the story you're going with. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He knew he had no ground to stand on. He turned away, looking out the window like he couldn't even face me when he spoke. It was Evelyn, he muttered. My stomach twisted. What? He sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. Evelyn. She was the one who suggested it, pushed for it, said it was important. My hands curled into fists against my legs. I already knew Evelyn had a hand in this, but hearing it confirmed, knowing that this wasn't just some disgusting mistake but something that had been planned, it took everything in me not to break something. She told Madison it was the right thing to do, he continued. That you wouldn't understand that it was about the family. She kept saying it had to be this way. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. And you just went along with it? He exhaled sharply, running his fingers through his hair. You don't get it, man. She didn't give me a choice. I turned to him, my vision narrowing. What did you just say? His throat bobbed. I didn't let him finish. You didn't have a choice? Are you serious right now? Did she hold a gun to your head? Did she threaten your life? No? Then shut the hell up about not having a choice. He winced but didn't argue. Because we both knew the truth, he could have walked away. Could have said no. Could have not slept with my wife. But he did. And now there was a child. I leaned back in my seat, my head pounding. How long? He hesitated. My jaw clenched. How long? A little over a year. A cold, sinking feeling settled in my chest. A year. They had been lying to me for a year. And I was just supposed to never know. I stared out the windshield, my mind racing, trying to process. But there was no way to process this. No way to rationalize it. It was just wrong. I told her to tell you, he said suddenly, his voice quiet. Months ago. I told her it wasn't right to keep it from you. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because this was some next-level insanity. Oh, wow. You really had my best interests at heart, huh? He had the decency to look ashamed again. I shut up. Silence. I took a slow, deep breath, staring straight ahead. Where's the kid? He hesitated again, and that hesitation told me everything. My stomach twisted. Where is the kid? With Madison. I turned to him so fast it made his whole body tense. So you've been seeing her? Seeing them? Behind my back. He swallowed. Not like that, I laughed again, this ugly, bitter sound. Not like that? Oh, so what, you two just have family outings together? Daddy-daughter days. He flinched. Good. You make me sick, I muttered, gripping the wheel so tightly my hands ached. He sat there, silent, because what could he even say? Nothing. Because there was no justification for this. No forgiveness. And as I sat there, feeling everything in my world crash down around me, I realized something. I had wasted an entire year of my life living a lie. And now I had to decide what to do about it. That I drove in silence. My brother-in-law sat beside me, stiff and quiet, probably scared out of his mind. Good. He should be. He should be sitting there replaying every disgusting choice he made. Every moment he could have walked away but didn't. I wasn't taking him anywhere specific. I was just driving, trying to keep myself from doing something I couldn't take back. The car was too small, the air too thick, my thoughts too loud. Every time I glanced at him, I felt that sickness in my stomach crawl higher, twisting around my ribs. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled into an empty parking lot and threw the car into park. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. You need to explain something to me, I said, my voice almost too calm. Why? He didn't answer right away, probably trying to figure out how to spin it. How to make himself look less awful in all of this. I told you, he muttered. Evelyn didn't force you. I turned to him, my blood boiling. She might have pushed for it, she might have manipulated her, but at the end of the day, you made the decision. You. So tell me, how do you go from being my brother-in-law to this? He exhaled, dragging a hand over his face. He looked exhausted. Like this was hard for him. I don't know, he muttered. I really don't. It just happened. A hollow laugh ripped out of me. It just happened? I repeated. So you tripped one day, fell into my wife, and she just happened to get pregnant? That's your story. He winced. That's not. No, shut up. Shut up. I was gripping the steering wheel again, my whole body shaking with rage. You don't get to, I don't know, your way out of this. You don't get to act like this was some accident. You knew what you were doing. His mouth opened, then closed. Like he wanted to argue but couldn't. Because he knew I was right. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Just the sound of my heavy breathing, the quiet hum of the engine. And then something else clicked in my brain. Something worse. Something that made my pulse stutter and my stomach drop. Does my wife love you? His head snapped toward me. What? You heard me. My voice was low, steady. Dangerous. Does she love you? He hesitated. Too long. That was all the answer I needed. I exhaled slowly, staring out the windshield. How long have you been seeing her behind my back? After she got pregnant, he admitted. She said she didn't want you to know, but she also didn't want to cut me out completely. My jaw locked. So you two played house? It wasn't like that, he said quickly. I turned to him again, my patience completely gone. Don't lie to me. He flinched but didn't deny it. I leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment. So let me get this straight, I said, voice shaking. My wife had a child with you, lied about it, hid it from me, and then decided to keep you around while continuing to lie to my face every single day. He didn't respond, because there was nothing to say. I opened my eyes, my vision sharp, my mind clearing. I want to see the kid. His head snapped toward me again. What? I want to see her, I repeated, my voice firm. Right now. He swallowed. That's not a good idea. I let out another humorless laugh. Oh, now you care about what's a good idea? That's cute. She doesn't even know who you are, he said quickly, like that would stop me. I turned to him slowly. That's the problem. His face paled. I threw the car into drive. Give me Madison's location, I ordered. He hesitated again, and I had never been so close to dragging an answer out of someone in my entire life. But finally, after a long, tense moment, he pulled out his phone. And when I saw where Madison was, everything in me went ice cold. Because she wasn't home. She wasn't at a friend's place. She was at Evelyn's. And suddenly everything made sense. I drove with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. No hesitation, no second guessing, just cold, undeniable truth guiding me forward. Everything I thought I knew about my life had been ripped away, and the only thing left was this moment. I had to see them. I had to see her. My brother-in-law sat stiffly in the passenger seat, probably debating if he should jump out of the car while we were still moving. I didn't care. If he wanted to roll onto the pavement and break a few ribs, that was his problem. The second I pulled up in front of Evelyn's house, I could feel my pulse slamming in my skull. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I stared at the house, that house. The one I had visited 100 times, sat in for family dinners, pretended to enjoy shallow conversations with a woman I now realized had been playing me from the beginning. Now I knew better. Now I knew exactly who she was. And I knew she was inside right now, probably sitting with Madison, both of them laughing like they hadn't just destroyed my entire life. I turned to my brother-in-law. You're coming with me. He hesitated, his hand already on the door handle like he was considering running. Now. He swallowed and nodded. We stepped out of the car, and I walked straight to the door, my heartbeat loud in my ears. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. The second I tried the handle, I realized something: it wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. Because why would they expect anyone to come looking for them? Why would they ever expect consequences? I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house smelled like expensive candles, the same artificial lavender scent that had always made me feel like I was choking. I had barely taken 2 steps in before I heard them, voices, low and familiar. Madison, Evelyn, and someone else. A child. My stomach twisted. I followed the voices toward the living room, every step sending another rush of adrenaline through me. My brother-in-law walked behind me, silent, probably too much of a coward to say anything now that he had to face what he did. And then I saw them. Madison was sitting on the couch, her back to me. Evelyn was across from her in an armchair, sipping tea like she was completely unbothered. And right there, on the floor between them, was a little girl. My chest tightened. She was small, maybe around 1 year old. Curly hair, big eyes, playing with some stuffed animal while Madison and Evelyn talked like nothing was wrong. Like this was normal. Like this wasn't the biggest betrayal of my life. I took another step forward, and that's when Madison finally noticed me. She turned, and the second she saw me, her whole body froze. For a split second, I saw everything flash across her face: shock, fear, panic. Then, just as quickly, she covered it up. Babe, she said, forcing a smile like I had just come home from work. What are you doing here? Babe. She had the audacity to still call me that. I didn't respond. I was too busy staring at the little girl on the floor, my mind racing through every possibility, every horrible, disgusting reality. Madison followed my gaze, then stood up quickly like she could block my view. I can explain. I laughed. Short, sharp, dangerous. Oh, you can explain? I finally said. Fantastic. Can't wait to hear this one. Evelyn finally spoke up, setting her teacup down with a little clink. You're overreacting. I turned to her so fast it almost gave me whiplash. Overreacting? She raised an eyebrow, calm as ever. Lower your voice. You're upsetting the child. I let out a slow, shaky breath, my hands trembling with the effort not to throw something. I'm upsetting the child? You mean the child I was never supposed to know about? The child my wife had with my brother-in-law behind my back. Madison flinched. Please, just no, I snapped. You don't get to please me. You don't get to talk your way out of this. Tell me the truth. Right now. She hesitated. Evelyn sighed like this was also inconvenient for her. We made a family decision, she said simply. A sharp, ugly laugh ripped out of me. A family decision? I repeated. That's what we're calling this? Madison finally spoke, her voice small. I didn't want to hurt you. I turned to her, my entire body numb. You didn't want to hurt me? My voice was eerily calm. Madison, you had a child with my brother-in-law and lied about it for a year. Every single day, you looked me in the eye and pretended like nothing was wrong. You let me believe we were still a family when you had already replaced me. Her face crumpled. I didn't replace you. Didn't you? Silence. I shook my head, exhaling shakily. You were never going to tell me. She swallowed hard. It was complicated. I let out another bitter laugh. No, it wasn't. Evelyn finally stood, smoothing out her expensive sweater. This conversation is over, she said. You're making a scene. I turned to her, hatred bubbling in my chest. You are the worst person I have ever met. She smiled, tilting her head. And yet, I'm the one who has exactly what she wants. Madison sucked in a sharp breath. Mom! Evelyn ignored her. You should leave now. I stared at her. This woman who had manipulated everything from the start. Then I looked at Madison, the woman I thought I knew. And finally, I looked at the little girl on the floor. She didn't know any of this. She didn't ask for any of this. And yet, she was the only innocent person in this entire room. My throat felt tight, my chest heavy. This isn't over. Evelyn smirked. Yes, it is. I didn't look at Madison again. I didn't look at my brother-in-law. I just turned around and walked out, because I needed to figure out my next move. And this time, they weren't going to see it coming. I drove without a destination. My mind was too clouded with everything I had just witnessed, the child, Evelyn's smirk, Madison's pathetic attempt at damage control. The weight of it pressed against my chest, threatening to suffocate me. They had done this, planned this, and they had expected to get away with it. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my fingers aching from the pressure. Madison hadn't looked sorry. Not really. She had looked caught. And Evelyn? She had looked victorious, like she had just won some kind of twisted game. And maybe, in her mind, she had. Because right now, I had nothing. No leverage. No way to undo what they had done. But I wasn't just going to roll over and accept this. I needed a plan. And I needed proof. I spent the next few days gathering everything. I went through old texts, bank statements, Madison's social media. Anything that could tell me exactly when this started and how deep the lies went. And what I found. It was worse than I imagined. This hadn't been just an affair. It hadn't been a moment of weakness or some fleeting mistake. It had been a decision. And not just Madison's. Evelyn orchestrated this whole thing. I found old emails she had sent to Madison months before the affair even started. Evelyn, you need to think about the bigger picture, sweetheart. It's not just about you. It's about the family. Madison. I know, but I don't think he would ever agree to something like that. Evelyn, that's why you can't ask him. Some men just aren't meant to be fathers. This is about blood. About legacy. You have to make the right choice. I felt sick. She had been pushing this from the beginning. And Madison? She had been hesitant at first. But then slowly she stopped arguing. And then the messages changed. Madison, I don't know how I'm supposed to face him after this. Evelyn, you don't have to tell him anything. You already made your choice. There's no point in ruining everything now. Madison, I feel guilty. Evelyn, you'll get over it. I shut my laptop, my stomach turning. I had all the proof I needed now. But proof wasn't enough. I needed justice. And that meant hitting them where it hurt the most. The next morning, I met with a lawyer. I want a divorce, I said as soon as I sat down. The lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s, nodded like she had seen this 100 times before. All right. Do you and your wife share any assets? I pulled out the documents I had printed. Yes. And I want to make sure she gets as little as possible. She glanced at the papers. Then she looked back up at me, her expression unreadable. And do you have any reason to believe she's been unfaithful? I almost laughed. Instead, I pulled out my phone and showed her everything. The texts, the emails, the bank transfers that showed Madison had been financially supporting her secret second family. My lawyer's eyebrows raised slightly. This is a lot. I want to bury her, I said, my voice calm. I don't want her getting a cent from me. I don't want her walking away from this like she did nothing wrong. She leaned back, thinking, well, with this level of evidence, we can absolutely make sure she walks away with as little as possible. Especially if she's been using shared assets to fund this affair. She has. I slid over the bank statements. My lawyer nodded, flipping through them. And what about the child? I stiffened. What about her? Well, technically, since the child isn't biologically yours, you have no legal obligation to her. But given the circumstances, your wife might try to argue for financial support. I laughed. Actually laughed. She thinks I'm going to pay for the child she had with another man? The lawyer smirked. Not if I have anything to say about it. That night, I sent Madison a text. We need to talk. She responded almost immediately. Madison, I know you're angry, but please let's just be rational about this. I didn't answer, because she had no idea what was coming. Madison had no idea what was coming. She thought she still had control, that she could manipulate her way out of this the same way she had manipulated our entire marriage. But I wasn't the same man I was a week ago. That man had been naive. That man had believed in love, in trust, in the idea that marriage meant something. That man was dead. And the one sitting across from her now? He was here to burn everything down. We met at a neutral location, some quiet cafe in a part of town neither of us had any attachment to. No memories, no emotions. Just cold reality. Madison arrived looking prepared. Like she had spent the whole day rehearsing what she was going to say, planning out exactly how to twist things in her favor. She sat down across from me, adjusting her sleeves like this was some business negotiation. I leaned back in my seat, watching her. Go on then. She blinked. What? You obviously have a speech prepared. Let's hear it. She let out a breath, like I was being difficult. Like I was the unreasonable one here. Look, she said, folding her hands on the table. I know you're hurt. I know you're angry. But you have to understand. I tilted my head. Understand. She swallowed. It wasn't personal. I laughed. Right in her face. People turned to look, but I didn't care. Not personal? I repeated. Madison, you lied to me. For a year. You carried another man's child while still sleeping in my bed. Still kissing me goodbye in the morning. Still pretending like we were a normal couple. You planned an entire life behind my back. And you have the nerve to sit here and tell me it wasn't personal? She looked away. It wasn't like that. Oh? How was it? Then. I crossed my arms. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty damn personal. She exhaled. Frustrated. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me? I repeated, my voice low. Then tell me something, Madison. If I had never found out. If I had never gone through your phone. When exactly were you planning to tell me? She flinched. And that was the answer. She never planned to tell me. She had fully intended to live out this lie for the rest of our lives. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. You didn't care about hurting me? I said, my voice dangerously calm. You only cared about getting caught. She looked down at her hands, probably realizing she wasn't winning this conversation. So she switched tactics. You don't understand what it's like, she said quietly. The pressure. The expectations. My mother, I cut her off. Your mother is a monster. And you let her turn you into one, too. Her eyes snapped to mine, and for the first time I saw something other than guilt or panic. I saw anger. You think this is so black and white, don't you? She snapped. Like I just woke up one day and decided to betray you. Do you have any idea how hard this was for me? How much I struggled? I stared at her, feeling something inside me go completely numb. Oh, poor you, I said, voice dripping with sarcasm. It must have been so difficult sneaking around behind my back. So painful lying to me every single day. Wow, Madison, you're the real victim here. She clenched her jaw. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. I shook my head, leaning back. You don't feel bad for what you did. You feel bad that I found out. You feel bad that now you have to actually face consequences for once in your life. She stayed quiet, and that silence told me everything. I exhaled slowly, looking her dead in the eye. I met with a lawyer. Her head jerked up. And I'm filing for divorce. Her breath hitched. Wait! I ignored her. I have proof. Bank statements, text messages, emails, evidence that you used our shared finances to support this little secret life of yours. And do you know what that means, Madison? She swallowed hard. Wait. It means you don't get a cent. Her face paled. You think you're going to walk away from this with half of everything? I laughed, shaking my head. No, you're going to walk away with nothing. She blinked rapidly, like she was trying to process just how badly she had miscalculated. Maybe we don't have to go through lawyers, she said quickly. We can talk about this. Work something out. There's nothing to work out. I stood up, throwing some cash on the table to cover the drinks. I don't negotiate with traders. She reached out, grabbing my wrist. Please. I know I messed up, but we can find a way to move forward. I pulled my arm away, looking at her like she was a stranger. Madison. My voice was quiet. Dead. We are never moving forward. I turned and walked out, leaving her sitting there speechless. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I finally felt like I was winning. I didn't look back as I walked out of that cafe. I didn't need to. I could already picture the stunned, panicked expression on Madison's face, the way her world was finally starting to crumble around her the way mine had when I found out the truth. She thought she could fix this. Thought she could manipulate, sweet-talk, or guilt-trip her way out of it like she had done with everything else in her life. But this wasn't some petty argument. This wasn't some misunderstanding she could talk her way around. This was the end. And the best part? She knew it now. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I had expected Madison to blow up my phone, to send long, desperate texts, to beg for another chance. Instead, silence. Not a single call, not a single message. That only made me more suspicious. Because Madison wasn't the type to give up. She was planning something. And I wasn't about to let her get the upper hand. So I went first. I scheduled another meeting with my lawyer. I want everything filed as soon as possible, I told her, handing over another stack of documents I had put together. And I want to make sure she doesn't have a way to screw me over in the process. She nodded, flipping through the paperwork. With everything you've gathered, it's a solid case. She used shared assets to support an affair. She knowingly lied for over a year. You have proof that her mother encouraged the deception. If she tries to fight this, she won't win. That should have been comforting. But I knew Madison. And I knew Evelyn. They wouldn't just accept this. They would fight. They would lie. They would try to twist the situation into something that benefited them. So I made sure I was ready for it. I called my bank and froze everything: joint accounts, shared credit cards, anything she might try to take advantage of now that she knew the divorce was coming. I updated my will, removed her name from everything. And then I did something that shouldn't have been necessary. But I wasn't taking any chances. I changed the locks on the house. Because even though Madison had been staying with Evelyn, I didn't trust her not to come back. And I was right. The next day, I came home from work to find Madison waiting on the front porch. She was sitting on the steps, her arms wrapped around herself, her head snapping up the second my car pulled in. I sighed, gripping the wheel before finally getting out. I didn't speak first. I wanted to see what angle she was going to play. She stood up slowly, her eyes wide, glassy. Can we talk? I exhaled through my nose. We already did. She took a step forward. Not like that. Actually talk. I raised an eyebrow. So now you want honesty? She flinched but didn't back down. I know I don't deserve it. But I just need you to hear me out. I folded my arms. You've got 2 minutes. She swallowed hard, glancing away before finally speaking. My mom. She started, voice shaking. She always told me I had to think about the family first. That I had to do what was best for everyone. Not just myself. I said nothing. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. I really didn't. I scoffed. And yet you did. She blinked rapidly, like she was trying to fight back tears. I felt trapped. I knew what I was doing was wrong. But Mom kept saying it was the right thing. That you wouldn't understand. That you wouldn't. I cut her off. You're really going to sit here and blame her? Madison's mouth opened, then closed. Yeah, Evelyn's a manipulative control freak, I'll give you that, I said, voice cold. But you're a grown woman. You made your own choices. No one forced you. She sniffed, looking down at her hands. I know. Then stop making excuses. Silence. For a second, I thought she might actually take responsibility. But of course, I should have known better. She took a deep breath, then looked at me with that expression. The same one she had used whenever she wanted to win an argument. What if we tried again? I stared at her. Excuse me. She swallowed, taking another step forward. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But maybe we can move past this. We were happy before, right? I let out a slow, humorless laugh. You think we can just move past the fact that you had a baby with my brother-in-law? Tears welled up in her eyes. I just don't want to lose you. I shook my head, stepping back. You already did. Her face crumpled. But no, I said, voice firm. You don't get to do this. You don't get to make me feel guilty for your mistakes. You lied. You betrayed me. And now you're going to live with the consequences. She sniffled, wiping at her face. I never stopped loving you. I stared at her, feeling nothing. Because even if that was true, it didn't matter anymore. You should leave, I said simply. Her shoulders slumped, her lips parting like she wanted to argue. But she saw the look in my eyes. And she knew. This wasn't her choice anymore. She had lost. And I had won. Madison stood there for a long time, her eyes darting across my face like she was searching for something. A weakness. A crack. Anything she could use to pull me back in. But there was nothing left to find. She had burned every bridge. Torn apart every last piece of trust one had in her. And now she was standing in the wreckage, realizing too late that she had nothing left. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't the one grasping for answers. She was. And I let her drown in it. I turned away, unlocking my front door. I meant what I said. You should leave. She let out a choked breath, her voice barely above a whisper. You really don't love me anymore? I looked at her over my shoulder. And I told her the truth. No, I don't. Her lips trembled. But she didn't argue. Didn't beg. Didn't fight. She just nodded, stepping back off my porch like she had finally accepted defeat. I shut the door without another word. And for the first time in over a year, I felt free. The divorce moved quickly. Madison must have realized she had no way to win because she didn't even try to contest it. Maybe she thought that by giving up gracefully, I'd go easy on her. Maybe she thought I'd let her walk away with something. She was wrong. Because I made sure she walked away with nothing. She got no money. No assets. Nothing but the consequences of her own decisions. My lawyer made sure of that. And when the final papers were signed, when I walked out of that office knowing I was finally done with her, I expected to feel something. Relief. Closure. A sense of justice. But all I felt was emptiness. Because at the end of the day, no amount of revenge or legal victories could change the fact that I had wasted years of my life on a lie. That the woman I had loved had never really been who I thought she was. And there was no way to get that time back. A few weeks later, I got a text from my brother-in-law. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity got the better of me. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to hear it. I stared at the message for a long time, my fingers hovering over the screen. Then I deleted it. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need anything from him. Or from Madison. Or from anyone in that family ever again. One last thing happened before I fully cut them out of my life. I was leaving a grocery store when I ran into Evelyn. She was standing by the parking lot, talking to some other woman, but the second she saw me, her lips curved into that infuriating little smirk. Like she still thought she had one. Like she still thought she had beaten me. I could have ignored her. I should have ignored her. But I didn't. I walked right up to her, my voice cold and steady. I just wanted to say congratulations. She raised an eyebrow. For what? I smiled. For raising a daughter just as miserable and manipulative as you. For the first time ever, I saw something crack in her expression. I didn't wait for her to respond. I just walked away. And that was the last time I ever saw any of them. It's been a few months now. Some days I still wake up expecting to roll over and see Madison beside me. Some days I still feel the anger creeping in, the bitterness at how much I lost because of her. But those days are getting fewer and farther between. Because now, I get to rebuild. Without lies. Without manipulation. Without people who see me as nothing more than a pawn in their disgusting family games. And for the first time in a long time, I finally feel like my life is my own again. Madison thought she could break me. Evelyn thought she could control me. But they were both wrong. Because I survived them. And I will never let anyone treat me like that ever again.